February 1993. Cold air, quiet streets. Kind of silence that feels staged, like the world was holding its breath for something awful. Gary Sudbrink, a lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force, was on leave from Brooks Air Force Base. He was staying at his parents' house in Elmont, New York, just trying to enjoy some time off, trying to remember what normal felt like. One night the phone rang. Nothing unusual, harmless on its own. Gary picked it up, but the voice that answered, it was anything but normal, and the fear it struck into Gary's heart was anything but harmless. What he heard on the other end wasn't the wrong number. It wasn't a prank. The voice was slow and robotic, flat and cold, like it was trying to sound human, but couldn't quite pull it off. This would have been bad enough, but to make matters worse, the voice knew things it shouldn't have, things no one should have. Gary's nightmare began with the question,
Is Gary Sudbrink there?
Before the calls, before the static, before the voice that sounded like a machine trying to mimic a soul, there was a wedding. It was early 1992. Gary had been enjoying a drink, half warm and mostly untouched, at his brother Stephen's wedding reception on Long Island. The room buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses and the soft hum of a string quartet fighting to be heard over the growing noise of celebration. Gary was home, on leave from Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. Another ghost in uniform passing through the crowd, nodding politely, pretending the world hadn't changed while he was gone. The past 24 hours had been a blur of handshakes, hugs, and hollow small talk with family he hadn't seen in years. He hadn't even gotten the chance to properly congratulate Stephen, let alone have a real conversation with him. That's when Stephen found him, nursing a drink, spine pressed to the wall like he was bracing for impact, half expecting an uncle to stagger over and draft him into another story about a war he never fought in a country he'd never seen. Instead, Stephen came with something else, something off. He started ribbing Gary about his driving earlier that morning, about pulling up behind him on the expressway, weaving between lanes like a man possessed, then pulling alongside of him and making bizarre faces, childish ones, exaggerated and wild. Then Gary supposedly floored it and sped ahead, racing to beat his brother to the venue like it was some kind of twisted victory lap. Gary just stared at him, the noise of the reception dulling to a low throb in his ears.
Steve, I just flew in last night. My car's in the garage back in San Antonio.
The words hit like hammer on glass. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The laughter around them didn't stop, but it felt like it came from a different world, a safer one. Stephen's smile faded, not out of fear, just confusion, a creeping sense that something hadn't added up, and maybe never would. But it was a wedding. People had to be hugged, dances had to be danced, and toasts had to be made. So they shrugged it off, tucked it away somewhere behind the eyes, and went on pretending, but neither would forget. Several months later, the phone started ringing at the Sudbrink house. The night of February 8th, 1993, around 10:30, an inhuman voice asked for Gary by name. That supposed case of mistaken identity on the road started to look like something else entirely. The copycat on the highway was only the beginning.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Dancing Toaster. This is Nelly, that was but a taste, and this is the place where we wrestle with the intersection of faith and the unexplained. Before we go any further, I want to say to my toasties, those that support me over on Patreon, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your support, but also thank you for May, for your understanding, that is. I had to do some traveling this May, and it affected the flow of content, but my baby sister was getting married, and it had been a long time since I saw my pops, so the trip was necessary, and it was beautiful. and you helped make it happen, so thank you. To B, I want to say I love you, and I'm proud of you. And Dad, thanks for making all that time for me. It meant more than you know. One of the main reasons I'm into all the stuff that I am is because of my pops. He's always been into it, and I used to watch various things with him growing up about Bigfoot, aliens, history, UFOs, and the like. But the internet was still in its infancy, and mentally so was I, so I didn't hear about the Sudbrink Calls until much, much later. Most of this vacation was spent talking with my pops about all the stuff we talk about here on the show, and I couldn't have asked for a better time. What son doesn't want to make his dad proud? I love that he loves the show. I also love that so many of you love the show. While I was traveling, I got some awesome messages and feedback from folks from all over, some just finding the show, others who have been with me from the beginning. You want to reach me? You can always reach out on social media, or you can email me at thedancingtoasterpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to help me in my work, head over to buymeacoffee.com/thedancingtoaster or connect with me on the Patreon. Toasties get early access, ad-free listening, and a member-exclusive show called The Man-Eating Toaster, where I cover cults and bizarre true crime. You're going to be getting extra stuff this summer to make up for me being out of town in May because of my travels, but I didn't want the wider audience to have no content at all, so I dropped that massive Scientology two-parter from The Man-Eating Toaster. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hopefully there is enough FOMO for you to head over to the Patreon, where there's more stuff like it and even more to come. Now, last thing I want to remind you about is that my store launched in May. Everybody asked for merch, but only a handful of you have went over there to get you some gear, so get on over there. What are you waiting on? The logo tee is fun, but I also got the Dancing Toaster Abduction tee, along with the Sasquatch tee. More designs are coming this summer. Don't hesitate to reach out. Let me know what stuff you'd like to see from the Dancing Toaster store. Do me a favor, once you get it, take a picture of yourself in it. Don't be shy. Put it on social media, tag me, and let others know how it looks, because I'm sure they're dying to see something other than stale website images. If you also have item ideas, design ideas that you would like to see from me, just let me know. Hit me up in any number of those places I shared with you. Where can you find the store? Well, I'm glad you asked. Just go to thedancingtoasterstore.printful.me. That's printful.me. Link is in the description for this episode, as well as links to all the other stuff I mentioned, but that is enough housekeeping. Sorry. If you remember episode 27 on the Montauk Project, you probably are wondering, what's up with the Sudbrink Calls? Why aren't we talking about Project Gateway with the CIA and the Monroe Institute and all that stuff? Well, it is coming, but I did have some monkey wrenches thrown into my initial approach. While I was doing all my driving and flying this month, I was listening to the Telepathy Tapes, a 10-part podcast that's given me a lot to think about and to process. If you're wondering what telepathy has to do with astral projection and OBEs or out-of-body experiences, then I highly recommend you check out the Telepathy Tapes podcast. Listen with the phone in one hand and your Bible in the other. It's not all good, but it's definitely not all bad. It's incredibly thought-provoking and touching, to be sure. In any case, I'm trying to process some things and rework the script I had initially planned. My friends over at the Unrefined podcast actually had one of the moms from the Telepathy Tapes on their show. You need to go check that out. Go check out all their other stuff. It's all great. Head on over there. Let them know that I sent you. As for me right now, time waits for no man. Y'all deserve episodes, and this one involving Gary Sudbrink is a really creepy, fun one that I didn't find out about for some time. I'm a late 80s baby, so though this happened around 93, I was still playing with my Ninja Turtles and Ghostbusters when Gary and his family were getting spooked up in New York. This is an extended story time today, and during this story, you're going to be hearing the original phone calls that Gary Sudbrink and his family received that winter of 93. I was able to find the full audio on SoundCloud from Strange Beacons. You can find it there in any number of places out on the internet. Being that this is purely an audio show, there's so much I can't show you, but now that we're dealing with calls with audio, I figured it only seemed right to let you hear the original calls yourself to help you make up your mind. So buckle up. Let's dive in.
Gary flipped through his schedule, eyes skimming the blank spaces. For the first time in weeks, the calendar didn't own him. He had a few days off. No obligations, no drills, no one watching the clock. The Air Force didn't schedule free time. It leaked through the cracks, and Gary didn't want to waste it. He booked a flight to Long Island to visit his family, the kind of last-minute decision that felt casual at the time, but it wouldn't for long. He hadn't been home since his brother Stephen's wedding almost a year prior. The memory of that night still clung to him like the aftertaste of cheap champagne, bizarre, unexplained, and unfinished. Official protocol demanded paperwork for the foray. He should have filed a request with the paper pushers, notified someone, tugged on the chain of command. But he figured 3 days under the radar wouldn't raise any alarms. He'd pop in, he'd pop out. No one on base would even know he was gone. That anonymity would make what happened next all the more unsettling. Gary was alone, packing a bag that didn't need much in it, just enough to look like he planned on coming back. The base was quiet, his apartment quieter. All you heard was the hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock, and the dead air pressing against the windows. Until another sound shattered the mundane harmony. It was low, sudden, and loud. It clearly did not belong. It wasn't the hum of traffic, no barking dog. It was a sound with a purpose. Mechanical, heavy, hungry. This Air Force lieutenant didn't need to see it to know what it was. He'd spent too many hours under rotor blades not to recognize the song they sang. He stepped out onto the balcony, instinct already 5 seconds ahead of him, and there it was. A black helicopter, matte frame, no markings. It was hovering low, 20 feet, maybe less, close enough to feel the pressure in your teeth. The rotors fought gravity like they were angry about it, and the whole thing was angled toward him. It wasn't drifting, it wasn't passing through, it was hovering, watching. Military pilots didn't fly low over civilian housing unless they had a death wish or a reason. And reasons were worse. He rushed back inside. He grabbed the binoculars he barely used anymore. When he returned, it was gone. No stutter, no fade out, gone. Like the sky swallowed it whole. Nothing left but the faint stink of exhaust and the distant whine of a world that didn't notice. He told himself it was a mistake. Must have been a training run. But lies like that don't land right when you're alone. Hours passed. Gary was in the airport that was breathing in waves of announcements and half-hearted goodbyes. He stood there in uniform, not because he wanted attention, but because it was easier than explaining who he was. Military personnel came through all the time. He was just another ghost in government green until someone decided he wasn't. The man came out of nowhere, thin, pale-looking, civilian by the looks of it, but an overcoat hanging off his frame like a bad secret. His smile was too smooth, like a used car salesman or a politician on campaign. He didn't make small talk, he made contact.
Where are you headed?
Visit a family.
Oh yeah? Where's home?
New York. Gary kept it vague, but something itched under his skin. This guy wasn't chatting, he was recording. The notebook gave it away. He was jotting things down, every answer logged like evidence, not casual, not innocent. Then it got personal.
So what's your full name?
Gary said nothing, sure that his ID would make it clear until he checked and realized his name was invisible.
Hey, what's with all the questions?
The man smiled at him, that same over-practiced expression.
Just starting a small business, doing a little market research is all.
But Gary hadn't seen him speak to anyone else in the terminal. No survey, none of the clipboard hustle. He made a straight shot across the room right to him.
Don't worry, you won't get in trouble.
The words felt like a veiled threat dressed up in a suit. Then the boarding call came. Salvation in the form of a gate number. Gary walked slowly without looking back. He took his seat, trying to shake the tension, trying to tell himself it was nothing. But nothing was already waiting for him in the next seat. Like good cop, bad cop, this guy came and sat down with a softer grin. His longer hair, wired frame glasses, and laid-back voice gave a different approach, but still with the questions.
So where you flying?
New York.
Nice. How long you staying?
Few days. This one was less threatening, but it still felt rehearsed, too smooth, like deja vu in a stranger's voice. Then another passenger showed up. He told Mr. Wired Frames.
Excuse me, I think you're in the wrong seat.
He smiled and moved across the aisle. Then he went back to asking questions, more smiling, more digging. Several minutes passed. The stewardess showed up now.
Excuse me, sir, I believe you're in the wrong seat.
Wireframe smiled again, stood up, but still passively refusing to go wherever his actual seat was. He just stood there now, leaning near the emergency exit like he belonged next to bad decisions, and started grilling Gary again.
When are you flying back to Texas? Like I said, in a few days.
Then Mr. Wireframes asked him,
Hey, how do you spell your last name?
Gary froze. Whatever politeness remained on his face after the two chilling encounters had jumped from the plane. He shut the man out, didn't answer, didn't smile, didn't blink. Whatever this was, it was too precise to be coincidence. It smelled like surveillance, felt like a test. It was only a few seconds, but they felt like hours. Eventually, Wireframes got the message. He finally walked away, disappearing somewhere near the back of the plane. Gary never saw him again. When they landed, his eyes scanned the crowd as the bodies piled out of the plane, but no sign of Wireframes. Even still, the feeling didn't leave him. Something was wrong. Something was tracking him. And no one, not the base, not the airline, not his own command, was supposed to know he was coming. But somebody did. When Gary's boots touched the ground in New York, the unease had calcified into something heavier. Paranoia wasn't just an idea anymore. It had weight, heavier than his carry-on. Gary couldn't shake the feeling that the men at the airport weren't just asking questions. They were measuring him, plotting something, maybe worse. The thought clung to him as he left the terminal, chewing on the inside of his cheek and mentally replaying every strange detail. He picked up a payphone and called his landlady. Told her to keep an eye on the apartment in San Antone. Told her he'd explain later. He thought to himself that maybe this was all just a setup for a robbery or something, but if it was the most elaborate one he'd ever seen. But that theory died the moment he stepped through his parents' front door. He sat down with his father, trying to make sense of the bizarre chain of events. Just as he finished recounting the helicopter outside his apartment, his father leaned forward and dropped his own bombshell.
Funny you should say that. We had a helicopter here too, just this afternoon.
Color left Gary's face.
It was right above the house, low, loud, didn't see any markings.
But his father wasn't done. That wasn't the strangest part. With a nervous breath, he told Gary about a trip he'd taken a few weeks earlier. It was an impromptu road trip with Gary's uncle to West Virginia. The destination? The Green Bank Observatory. They'd gone to see the newly constructed 485-foot telescope, the one built to replace the previous one that had mysteriously collapsed in '88. Official reports blamed it on a faulty gusset plate, but to the growing crowd of UFO chasers, it looked more like sabotage, or maybe a warning. But from which side was unclear. Gary's dad had always flirted with the weird. Roswell, lights in the sky, cattle mutilations. He wasn't a tinfoil guy, but he didn't mind getting close enough to borrow one now and then. As fate would have it, they did see something on that trip. Unidentified, flying, and all wrong. Gary shrugged it off at the time. Just another case of shapes in the sky becoming stories on the ground. But the old man never let it go. And now that memory was bleeding into the present. Maybe the timing was coincidence. Maybe. But the world had stopped giving Gary the luxury of maybes. Later that Monday night on February 8th, after trying and failing to settle in, Gary reached out to a friend he hadn't spoken to in a while, named Mike. Just a casual call, catch up, shake the day loose. Mike picked up and the first words out of his mouth stopped Gary cold.
Hey Gary, you're sounding better already.
Better, he thought. Gary had no idea what he meant.
What are you talking about, Mike? We ain't spoken ages. But Gary, you just called me like 20 minutes ago. You sounded under the weather.
What Mike said hit Gary like a slug to the chest. He said they had spoken 20 minutes earlier. That he, Gary, had called. That he sounded like he had a cold. Gary knew he hadn't touched a phone and no one but his parents even knew he was in New York. But Mike insisted it was his voice and his name. Gary pressed him for details, and that's when the cracks appeared in the imitation. This imposter Gary had gotten some things wrong, like which airport he landed at. While the two tried to unravel this strange little puzzle, a tone cut in around 10:30. Call waiting. Someone or something was on the other line. Gary said to him,
Hey, Mike, let me call you back.
He clicked over, and he was sent spiraling down the rabbit hole well past Alice.
Yeah, who's this? Steven? Are you playing games with me or what? Huh? Steven, if you're playing games, I'm gonna kick your ass. So how long are you going to be back from Texas? Huh? You were being impersonated by the other voice. Yeah, this is you, Steven, you idiot. You're pissing me off. Jerk. I'm gonna get you on... Let's see what it says. Review. One new call out of area. Is Steven out of the area? Are you going to be back from Texas? Wait, say that again? You are being impersonated by the other voice. Wait, hold on. Is Steven out of the calling area or what? What do you mean you don't know? He's in Queens. Who are you talking? I don't know who the Hello?
Hello?
Here's Gary Sudbrink there.
Who is this? Sounds like a freaking robot.
Hello? How long are you going to be back from Texas? What was that again, sir? You were being impersonated by the other voice. Oh, be quiet, huh? Sorry, would you see that again? Hello? Being impersonated by what voice? Hello? Yeah. Hello? Here's Gary Sudbrink there. Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, what is your question? I'll answer it. So how long are you going to be back from Texas? How long? You were being impersonated by the other voice. Right. When am I coming back? Is that your question? Okay, there was a break. Hold on. You want to know when I'm coming back to Texas? Oh, is that your question? So how long are you going to be back from Texas? How long am I going to be back from Texas? That question doesn't make any sense. By the other voice. Okay. I'll be coming back eventually. I can't tell you when. You should know that question, the answer to the question, because you seem to know more about me than I do. You know what I'm saying?
Are you an intergalactic person?
Are you a space alien?
Sounds like he hung up.
I can't believe this.
He hung up, Gary.
See if he comes back.
All right, I'll hang up.
His head was spinning. The recording crackled. Voices in the room shifted. You could feel the moment when disbelief curdled into fear. Gary tried to rationalize it all. Kept thinking and kept saying it had to be his brother. It had to be a stupid prank. A bad joke. But the repetition, the cadence, the tone, the way it mirrored the conversation with Mike, it was all too clean, too orchestrated. And it was far from over. Because 40 minutes later, the phone rang again.
What is your question? Yes, speaking. Yes. Can I answer any questions for you? Not back yet, no. How long? Let me answer. First, you tell me, where are you calling from? Yeah, why don't you tell tell me where you're calling from? What do you mean, who is this? You should know who it is. It's me, Gary. Wait, let me ask you this question. Where are you calling from? Okay, I'll be back. Excuse me? I can't hear too well. Yeah, there's a full moon out. That's true. Could you identify yourself? Identify yourself. Why are you calling me? Excuse me? I cannot hear too well.
Get on the other phone, it's better.
Hold on, let me switch phones. Okay. Okay, hold on. Now, who are you? Keep an eye in the sky, he said.
Keep an eye in the sky?
Yeah.
Yes, can I talk to him?
Shh.
I had a sighting.
Okay, hold on. Say that. Repeat that again. Please repeat. Okay. Near Orion.
Holy mackerel. Tonight or guess when?
The full moon.
They coach.
Repeat.
Tell him I like to talk to him.
Okay, repeat last word. I'm hearing static.
Tell him I like to talk to him.
He hung up.
He hung up?
Hello?
The second call came like a sequel nobody wanted. Not quite a repeat, but familiar enough to raise the hair on the back of Gary's neck. More incessant requests for Gary Sudbrink, and more questions about his return to Texas. But then, just like that, the subject veered off course into something far more bizarre. The voice began mumbling phrases about Orion, the full moon, and watching the skies. Its tone was flat, computerized, stretched like it was pulling signal from somewhere far beyond a phone line. Across the room, Gary's father perked up and kept interjecting. That mention of Orion wasn't random to him. It was a thread pulling loose from a memory he hadn't shaken. He was thinking back to when he and Gary's uncle had driven to West Virginia, to the Green Bank Observatory. Hearing the strange voice repeat Orion over and over again made the old man feel like it all had to be connected. This all felt targeted. The voice rambled on, flat, repetitive. This call ended with the final cryptic line. Then the call died again. Static, then silence. The first call had been weird, but this one felt intentional. As if the entity on the other end of the wire wasn't just contacting them, it was building a narrative, piece by piece, phrase by phrase. The father was convinced now whatever was speaking, it wasn't human and it wasn't his eldest son. But this dark, twisted Monday night wasn't over. With the house in lockdown and every shadow feeling heavier than the last, the phone rang again at 11:38.
Okay. Yeah, it's taking time from the talk. Who is this? Stephen, this is not funny, you know.
Brian, it's not Steven.
What do you mean, Brian?
I mean, Gary.
How do I know it's not Stephen?
It's not Steven. Hello? I had a
UFO experience in West Virginia, which you probably know. And I know that you're an intergalactic person. Can you speak a little louder? Sir? Can you speak a little louder? Louder?
Let me speak to him, Dad. I guess I don't know what to...
All right, I'll hang up so you can talk to him. He wants to talk to you.
Okay. Hello, can I help you?
Hello.
Yes. Yes, that's me. Yes, could you please identify yourself? Identify. Yeah, I'm back. I'm in Texas right now. Oh, he asked me a question. No, I'm in New York right now. You know that. Why are you asking me such a question? Yes. Stephen, if this is you, I swear to God, I'm going to be... Huh? I'm trying to listen to him. Who are... Excuse me? Okay. Eventually I'll be back from Texas. Could you speak more? Please speak more. I guess it's not Stephen. I believe it because I'm getting static. Let me go on this phone because I can never hear on this phone. Hold on. Okay. Okay, please speak. Hello? Okay. Should I go out right now? Right now? Okay, see, I'm not sure where Orion is now, but we'll go outside. It would show double from me. Repeat that again?
By the third call, the voice was more active. There was a kind of eagerness in its words, if eagerness could be filtered through a dead modem and wrapped in static. Gary desperately sought to understand, still deeply in denial, thinking it had to be his older brother Stephen. But as the voice began again, droning, eerie, the syllables falling like slow drips from a leaky faucet, that lie got harder to tell himself. Gary's father got more intrigued and more involved with every call. This time grabbing the second receiver. To his disappointment, though, the voice refused to engage. Every time the father would pick up, the inhuman voice would go quiet, retreating like a signal ducking behind a dead star. Eventually, he gave up and handed control of the call back to Gary. He pleaded to know the identity of the strange caller, but the voice just kept asking about his return to Texas from a trip nobody was supposed to know about. The voice didn't give much more. It spoke in clipped riddles, distorted phrases that felt like they'd been run through a broken translator. The phrase, "keep an eye on the skies," made the whole family's blood run cold, along with the additional mentions of Orion and the moon before ending the call once again with the cryptic phrase, "Show double from you." What did it mean? Was it a warning? A request? A statement of fact? Gary didn't know. And now he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Static would crackle until they were left with nothing but dead air. The house fell quiet once again, but definitely not calm. This quiet was like the one that presses on your ears, like a summer afternoon at the bottom of the pool in the deep end. The family waited eagerly to see if the entity would call again, but to no avail. On edge and full of questions, everyone eventually crashed out. The next day was long. The air was thin with expectation, but nothing happened. The phone stayed silent. The world resumed pretending it made sense. Then night came, Tuesday, February 9th, 1993. At 10:21 p.m., the phone rang one final time.
Yes, this is me. Can I speak to you? Can I ask why you're... Yes, can I ask why you're calling? Can I please ask? Yes, this is. Yes, that is me. Say that again? Leave? I'm staying right here. Is this a joke or what? I have to think about that. I'd like to see you.
Hey, let me tell you something. I've been listening to you, and I've had contacts with you.
Government interference? You have? Please explain what type of interference. Okay.
The sun will rise from the dark side of the moon.
Okay, what branch of the government? What should I do? Okay. Is that good for me or bad? They hung up.
Yeah.
Gary had picked it up, tired but sharp. The voice seemed clearer than before, still in that hollow tone, still speaking like it was building its thoughts as it went. It still kept asking for Gary over and over, getting creepier with every request. This felt like more of the same until the voice uttered, Three times it would utter this shocking phrase, repeating it but not explaining it, all to Gary's frustration. Then a brand new phrase to be repeated. It all still felt like nonsense and gibberish, but yet delivered with purpose. Like someone speaking in broken phrases just to get the ideas across. All was well up to that point, still very unsettling, but nothing to be alarmed about until the voice began to warn them. Gary desperately sought to know what kind of interference, what branch, what purpose. But no concrete answers would be found. The responses were scattered. The voice spoke of visitations being disrupted and something about the dark side of the moon. That last phrase landed like a bad omen etched in static. A puzzle that sounded like poetry if you weren't listening too closely. Then the line began to fade. Words grew soft. Clicks and crackles took over. Show double from you was uttered once again with the additional warnings to beware until the mysterious caller disconnects that final time. It would be the last call. The last time the Sudbrink family would speak to the unsettling voice. Gary never got another call, but the memory didn't end. The messages were burned into tape, etched into memory, and scarred into his nerves. His father called it proof. Gary called it something else. Something that watched, waited, and warned. And whoever or whatever it was, it knew his name. There are some stories that bleed across categories. They don't fit neatly in files or case folders. I think the Sudbrink Calls are one of those cases. Even with the recordings, the timelines, the witnesses, it's hard to say what we're dealing with. Was it a warning, a mistake, a transmission meant for someone or something else? Some say it's a government op gone wrong, a surveillance project with a mask too thin to hide the needlework underneath. Others think it's alien contact, a glitch in the system where something beyond the stars finally got a hold of a phone line. And then there's a darker option some embrace, the one you can't put into words without feeling them rot in your mouth. Some say this wasn't a visit from somewhere far away, but rather an intrusion. Something bleeding through from a place we weren't supposed to touch. Many familiar with this case have related it to other Men in Black type experiences as well, which doesn't really help narrow it down or explain it. It simply puts it in the negative space between myth and truth, in the margins of old UFO reports scribbled by men too scared to sign their names. The Men in Black aren't just spooks in suits, they're a symptom. They show up like smoke after the fire, always too late, always too strange. We had our first brush with them when we talked about the Mothman of Point Pleasant in episode 17. They move like people wearing skin the wrong way. Their voices stutter, their words come out fractured like they're being translated mid-sentence by a dying machine. They show up at your doorstep, quoting things you never said out loud. Their eyes don't blink right, their smiles hang in the air like threats. People like to say they're government, but government agents don't mispronounce your name 3 times before getting it right. Some say they're hybrids. Others think they're alien drones programmed to emulate human contact and failing just enough to be terrifying. But whatever they aren't here to comfort you. They seem to be here to remind us something is watching. And then there are the helicopters. Black, elusive, and unmarked. No insignias, no tail numbers, just shadow and metal, and noise that disappears into the night. They don't patrol, they stalk. They don't observe, they warn. Witnesses say they drift over rooftops like predators. Sometimes you hear them, sometimes you just feel them in your chest. And when you do see one, it's already too late to ask why. Those machines became legends in the 70s and 80s, always showing up after sightings, after confessions, after someone saw something they weren't supposed to. The matchbooks for these stories always smell the same: burnt ozone, diesel, and fear. This is the backdrop against which the Sudbrink Calls took place. A UFO sighting in the family, black helicopters outside their residential spaces, men with notebooks asking the wrong questions, and then a voice. Inhuman. Flat. Off. A voice that didn't belong on any phone line, let alone in the middle of a quiet New York home. It didn't just ask for Gary, it targeted him. Over 30 years later, we still have the recordings, still have the creepy voice,
and it still says the same phrase that cracks the air like a whisper through a keyhole. So the question remains, what are we to make of the Sudbrink calls?
You know doggone well this was all one big prank. It's all just one elaborate, well-timed hoax. I agree that robotic tone was flattening into something between humor and threat, but this story has all the ingredients of a practical joke gone too far.
Dr. Wright, you're late.
I most certainly am not. You just wouldn't shut up with your stupid deep voice storytelling.
I think I need another vacation, this one from you. The prank theory is, of course, the safest conclusion, maybe even the comforting one.
Nellie, it's the only logical one. Prank theory advocates like myself love to draw your attention to the tools of the time. It was the early 1990s after all. You of all people know the technology had taken its first awkward steps towards the playground. What was that one dumb toy that you wanted more than anything else?
Yes, the Talk Boy. I think Home Alone made every kid my age want one of those at the time.
Thank goodness you never got your delinquent little hands on one.
Really, Doc? Dang, you're calling me delinquent now?
You call me late again, I'll call you even worse. Anyways, that silly little device gave kids the power to slow down voices, twist pitch, record and replay with garbled menace. And the Sudbrink recordings, they could have been made by Kevin McAllister himself. It was just a bad impression of HAL 9000 after a long bender. Now, researchers, because of course someone always runs the tape through every filter known to man, have taken the liberty of speeding it up. And lo and behold, when you crank it up a little bit, what do you get? A voice that sounds human. Speed it up, it ain't alien, ain't demonic, it's not from another dimension, it's just a human playing a prank. Why don't you play my clip now, one that makes a little bit of sense?
Oh my goodness, fair enough, Doc. In the interest of science, we will play the audio sped up about double speed. To save time, we got the altered clip from a channel called Chameleon on YouTube. If you want to go check out the full thing yourself, here is a partial.
Do you want to speak to him?
Gary Sudbrink there.
Yeah, who's this, Steven? Are you playing games with me or what? Huh? Steven, if you're playing games, I'm gonna kick your ass.
So how long are you going to be back from Texas?
Huh?
You're being impersonated by the other voice.
Yeah, this is you, Steven, you idiot. You're me off.
As you can clearly see, or hear in this case, someone was just playing games, slowing down their voice with a cheap recorder, masking their tone to sound spooky. Like a dorky kid with a talk boy and too much time on their hands.
Who do you think would do that, Doc?
Well, it had to be someone close to Gary, a buddy, a brother, a co-worker, or something. Maybe someone who thought it'd be funny to mess with the Air Force guy on leave, who went on leave without asking in the first place. Again, just a prank. A weird prank, but a prank nonetheless. You nerds always so quick to label anything weird as paranormal. Sometimes it just means somebody was bored and had access to a cassette deck.
First I'm a delinquent, now a nerd? My goodness, rather than throw you out, you know what? I think this is the perfect time to bring in your best friend. Vinny, why don't you join us and tell us what are some of the issues with the doctor's theory?
Not that basement dweller again.
Hey. My Nona's got a nice basement, and I'm only there temporarily, all right? The case, Vinny, the case. What are the problems with the prank theory? Oh, all right. Look, there's problems with the prank theory, all right? Big ones. Like, can't ignore kind of problems. First off, yeah, they sped the voice up. Tried to clean it up a little bit. And sure, it kind of sounds human when you do that. It still doesn't land right, though. Doesn't sound like a Talk Boy prank. Doesn't sound like some kid in the garage playing Ghostbusters. It's off. Too off. And here's the other thing. Nobody's ever taken credit for it. Not once. Not in a Reddit post, not in some ancient forum, no YouTube comments, not even a joke at a bar. And come on, this happened in the 90s. People talk. If it was a gag, somebody would have cracked by now. That silence is deafening. But here's where it gets weird. Like really weird, because it's not just the calls. It's all the stuff happening around him. Gary gets approached by two total strangers at the airport before the calls even start. One guy's got a notebook and way too many questions. The other one can't sit still playing musical chairs on the plane trying to stay in Gary's orbit. That's not random, that's tracking. That's surveillance. Then back at home, his brother Steven says he sees Gary's car on the road that same day, same make, same model, same face behind the wheel. Only problem, Gary wasn't even in the state yet, and his car never came. It was chilling in San Antonio, 1,800 miles away. And then you got Mike, his friend. He picked up the phone thinking they already talked, swears Gary just called him. Same voice, same vibe, but something's off. Different airport, weird energy, just a little wrong. Not enough to panic, but enough to remember. Close enough to make your stomach twist. Close enough to be dangerous. I agree, it is fascinating, Vinny. If all true, it's the details around the calls themselves that can't be explained away with a talkboy and slowing down some audio. The calls would have been weird by themselves, but perhaps easier to dismiss were it not for the events surrounding them. What doesn't sit right with me is when Mike says he just talked to Gary, then the first strange call comes in saying, "You're being impersonated by the other voice."
That's because it's been Gary all along.
This guy, I thought you said it was a prank, Doc.
It is a prank, and our prankster is none other than Gary Sudbrink himself. He was the architect of this whole wild thing.
But for what, Doc?
This was all a cruel joke aimed at his daddy. Gary didn't believe in all this nonsense, but his father did. Look at how quick he was to say a spaceman was calling on the phone. He was like Vinny here, obsessed with UFOs and the unexplained, thinking every fart in the wind must be E.T. phoning home. Maybe he was getting annoyed by all his daddy's talk of UFO sightings, so he claims to see a black helicopter. He invents some mysterious visitors, calls Mike ahead of time, sets the whole stage for a 2-day psychodrama of fear.
All right, Doc, now you're the one creating conspiracy theories. If he's the mastermind, wouldn't this just make his father believe even more in this stuff? If the point was to get his father to take a step back into reality, the joke needs a punchline. Eventually, you gotta spill the beans and say, "Dad, I gotcha. You can stop with all this. It was me all along."
Fine, then he did it for money and attention.
I swear I'm gonna grab this guy by the ears and pull his head out of... Hey, family-friendly, Vinny, please. I was gonna say hole.
Vinny!
Not that hole, a hole in the ground. Pull his head out of the hole in the ground. You know, like somebody's ignorant or in denial, you know. Dr. Wright had his head buried in the ground. Denial about the truth. That's what I was gonna say. Just slow it down, Vinny, so we don't upset the kiddies or their parents, all right? He is right, though, Doc. Gary waited over a decade before ever mentioning the calls outside of the family. If he hadn't done interviews with a shrug and a quiet tone, never asking for money, never selling merch, never cashing in on the weirdness, if it was a prank on his dad or anyone else, then like I said, Gary forgot the punchline. Okay, but now it's time to go down the yellow brick road. Not with the lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, but the one line with black helicopters, no license plates, and the kind of dreams you wake up from already sweating. All of this screams UFOs. It's got all the hallmarks, doesn't it? Orion keeps coming up. The dark side of the moon gets a name drop. And then there's the classic line, beware government interference. You start adding all of that up and yeah, you're in that territory. The fringe, the flap, the somebody's watching you and it ain't the guy next door kind of territory. If you ever cracked open the weird books, Keel, Jacques Vallée, the Mothman prophecies, you've heard this kind of thing before. People see lights in the sky, then suddenly the phone rings. The voice on the other end, it ain't quite right. It sounds familiar, but the words, the phrasing, it's like trying to understand your own dream while you're still in it. That's what this feels like. If this was Alien Contact, it wasn't the Spielberg version. It was the low-budget broadcast, barely breaking through the noise, piggybacking off a landline from '93. And here's the kicker. Some folks think aliens don't talk the way we do. They don't do verbs and vowels, they think in shapes, patterns, and feelings. So if you want to say something to us, they gotta find a workaround. And hey, maybe the telephone's the best way they got. Would explain a lot, right? The weird pauses, the clunky grammar, lines like show double from you, to be contact that's the same with you. That's not how people talk, that's how a mimic talks. Somebody trying to wear a language like a suit that don't fit. Trying to sound human, but not pulling it off.
Please don't tell me you're taking any of this seriously.
I didn't say I agreed with Vinny, I just don't think your rebuttals explain all of the nuances and eccentricities of this case. There are other theories out there, ones that are colder and more human, and more terrifying in their precision. Some suggest that all of this was psychological warfare. Some believe Gary had wandered into the periphery of something bigger. Part of this has to do with the reports of him working on Nellis Air Force Base. As far as I could find, though, I researched and there was no record of him having any connection to Nellis. It just kind of was a detail that popped in one day and never popped out. Nellis is in Nevada, and everything points to Gary in Texas, and every detail of the call and everything that Gary has ever said all links back to Texas. Putting that aside, though, whether by accident or association, some believe Gary caught the eye of a government op with a long memory and a short fuse. He was both a U.S. Air Force officer and a pharmacist with access to secure locations. Maybe he saw something. Maybe his family's UFO sighting triggered surveillance. We don't know. Maybe someone wanted to see how he'd react when reality started bending at the edges. Those men at the airport, the weirdness wasn't a bug in the system, it was the message. They weren't just acting off, they were designed to leave fingerprints on Gary's nerves. Making Gary uneasy was perhaps the entire purpose. Like the last few episodes, let's step out of the paranormal for a moment and look at something with a dark paper trail, because there is a precedent for this kind of thing. A real-world example where the government didn't just observe people, they intentionally messed with them. From 1956 to 1971, the FBI ran a secret program called COINTELPRO, short for Counterintelligence Program. Its goal? Simple. Disrupt civil rights movements, anti-war activists, and anyone the Bureau labeled a political threat. Names included are Martin Luther King Jr., the Black Panthers, and a wide range of student groups and protest organizers. But this wasn't about surveillance in the traditional sense. COINTELPRO was a psychological ordeal, psychological warfare, domestic psy-ops aimed at making people feel unsafe in their own homes and in their own skin. The FBI used tactics like anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night. They made forged letters designed to ruin friendships, ruin marriages, and even careers. They spread lies to employers, to neighbors, to anyone who might turn cold toward their target. And sometimes they didn't try to hide. They'd follow people in ways that were just obvious enough to be noticed, never confirmed, never overt, just enough to create paranoia in the target, just enough to make you wonder if you were losing it. The objective wasn't always to arrest. It wasn't even necessarily to silence. It was to isolate, to disorient, and to destabilize. Because sometimes the scariest weapon isn't violence, it's uncertainty and fear. And when government agency intentionally sows confusion to erode a person's sanity, the line between conspiracy and policy disappears. Look, I know the government's done some shady stuff. COINTELPRO, MKUltra, the huge, right? They're played dirty, we know that. But this feels like more than that. I mean, they could have faked a voice, they could have sent a couple goons to spook Gary at the airport, but this gotta be something else. Because the calls kept talking about the other Gary. Is this Gary? Is this Gary? Is this Gary? You're being impersonated? If this is just psy-op shenanigans, then what about the doppelganger stuff? Mike saying, "You just called me 20 minutes ago." And worse, Steven telling Gary he saw him on the highway driving like a madman, smirking, making faces, a memory stamped in daylight. But impossible because Gary wasn't even there. That happened a year before the calls, before the UFO, before the black helicopter, but the voice on the line would say, "You're being impersonated by the other voice. Show double from you, show double from you." What if that's what it was talking about the whole time? There's two of you. Mike, who spoke to the imposter, said it sounded like him, just sick, like a cold that passed through a clone. So what are you saying, Vinny? Is it aliens or is it clones? What are you talking about? The answer's yes. What? What you mean, what? I'm saying yes. I'm saying it's both. The aliens are cloning people.
What in tarnation are y'all talking about?
Quiet, Doc. Let the man cook. I gotta hear this now. What, you think they crossed light years to just buzz some cornfields and yank cows into the sky like intergalactic pranksters? Nah. I think they're taking samples. They're building copies. That's what all the so-called abductions are about. Test runs, bioscans, pulling out the blueprints, and what better way to make a copy than somebody already under the radar? A guy like Gary, military but not high-ranking, just important enough to monitor but not important enough to miss if something goes sideways, you know what I'm saying? See, I think they tried something with them. Maybe they swapped them out. Maybe they brought one back with them. A stowaway version of Reflection that talks wrong, moves wrong, but almost passes. That's why the voice keeps saying, "Show double from you. You're being impersonated by the other voice." It said it ain't a metaphor, it ain't poetry, it's literal. If you think about it, how would you even know if there was a copy of you running around? You wouldn't. Not unless it started messing up. Not unless it started making calls you didn't make, saying things you didn't say. Gary didn't believe in this stuff. Not then, not yet. But whatever happened, whatever followed him back, it forced him to look. So yeah, you want to call it a psy-op, fine, but I'm telling you, whatever was on the phone line wasn't messing with his head. It was replacing him, and that's a different kind of war.
There ain't no clones running around here. Good night. I'm getting dumber every minute I listen to this man.
Well, slow down, Doc. Cloning does in fact exist already. Cloning is absolutely real, though maybe not in the way Hollywood or UFO lore often paints it. All that we know of. In modern science, we've successfully cloned animals using a process called somatic cell nuclear transfer, where the nucleus from a donor adult cell is implanted into an egg cell that's had its own nucleus removed. This is how Dolly the sheep was cloned back in '96, just a little bit after these creepy calls, I might add. You know, once a technology is publicly announced, it's already been around for years behind the scene. Take the internet, for example. Most folks think it popped into existence sometime in the mid-90s. Dial-up modems, AOL chat rooms, the whole deal. But what they don't realize is that the bones of the internet, the real foundation, was laid down decades earlier. Back in 1969, DARPA, the U.S. military's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, launched something called ARPANET. It was a secure network meant to help government researchers and scientists share data across the country. That was the birth of the internet as we know it. Not in Silicon Valley dorm rooms, but in Pentagon-funded bunkers. And while the rest of us were still watching rotary phones collect dust, the government had a digital nervous system already wired up. Public access didn't come until the early 90s, more than 2 decades later. But that's how it works. They build it, test it, weaponize it, and only when it's old hat do we get a watered-down version. So yeah, if they were cloning sheep in '96, maybe they were cloning other things long before we ever knew about it. Since Dolly, scientists have replicated the process in dogs, cats, cows, pigs, and even monkeys. There's even limited use of cloning in agriculture and conservation biology today. But when it comes to human cloning, things get murky. Scientists have cloned human embryos, but only for the purpose of extracting stem cells for therapeutic research. These embryos are never allowed to develop into full humans. We still have no credible source that anyone has ever proven the existence of a full cloned human being. Most countries have strict legal bans or heavy regulations on reproductive cloning of humans due to overwhelming ethical, medical, and societal concerns. And we all know that all scientists follow all rules and regulations all the time. Wink, wink, right? Yeah, no, definitely not, right? And, you know, as far as the whole cloning thing goes, there's all kinds of rabbit holes on TikTok and Instagram where you can see people putting photo next to photo, but, you know, that doesn't count as proof from a scientific perspective. Just keep that in mind.
Okay, fine, but even if human cloning were legally and technically possible, it wouldn't produce a carbon copy of someone like old Gary Sudbrink here. Cloning a body doesn't clone the mind. Memories, personality, voice, inflection, those come from environment, experience, and a million subtle factors science can't reproduce. So the idea of a perfect double capable of calling your friends and imitating your cold symptoms and driving your car, well, that goes far beyond any modern medical possibility. What y'all talking about in Gary's case, calling him some kind of doppelganger, that's absolute nonsense.
Well, you make some really good points, Doc. I'm glad to see you engaging with things a little bit more than just washing it off. But I'm not saying that this is what's going on. Excuse me, that's exactly what I'm saying.
We know.
Let's not let that happen again. Agreeing with either of you two makes me a little uncomfortable. Whether it's an alien mimic, a government-created facsimile, or a presence bleeding through some other dimension, it doesn't fit neatly into the box labeled science. Not yet, anyway. Was it a glitch in the Matrix, a rip in the veil? Wait a minute. I just thought of something. What if it was a Gary from another timeline bleeding into this one? Like temporal distortion or something. Like maybe a spot in the time where doppelgangers can walk freely and voices can bleed across frequencies not meant for our ears. So now it's time distortion and not aliens? What are you talking about? No. It's time distortion caused by the aliens. Of course it is. Well, over 30 years have passed. The calls remain unexplained. No names, no suspects, no proof. Just a handful of tapes, 4 calls, a few broken sentences, and a question that still hasn't gone away. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe it was a psy-op. Maybe it was something not of this world. Whatever it was, it left behind a message louder than words. There are forces out there we still don't understand, and sometimes they have our phone number. But before we close the book on Gary Sudbrink and his eerie phone calls, let's pause, because here we don't just gawk at the weird, we try to wrestle with what it means. And if you've been listening long enough, you know I can't walk away from something like this without asking, what does this have to do with the Bible or theology, if anything? I'm not saying scripture mentions black helicopters or robotic voices over the phone, but it does talk about deception. It warns us of lying signs and wonders in 2 Thessalonians 2, of entities that masquerade as messengers of light, 2 Corinthians 11, and of spirits that speak but do not come from God, 1 John chapter 4. The impersonation Gary experienced, the voice that claimed to be him or warned he was being doubled, feels uncomfortably close to biblical themes of identity theft on a spiritual scale. From the Garden in Eden to the end times in Revelation, the enemy's tactics have always been the same: distort the truth, disrupt identity, and fracture the image of God in mankind. Whether these calls were a prank, a psy-op, a demonic intrusion wrapped in modern noise, the pattern fits. Because Satan doesn't need a phone line, just an open door. He doesn't need a spaceship, just your attention. And he doesn't need to convince you of aliens, he just needs to pull you far enough from truth that you stop asking the right questions. Now, when I was a youth pastor, I'd get cool questions like, "Can demons use the phone to call you?" Many would laugh at such a question, and even some mock such a question, but I loved these questions because it allows you to wrestle with the text in ways that most never will. Many, not all, but many beings that we call demons are fallen angels. The word angel means simply messenger. There are plenty that want to communicate with us and deceive us with demonic messaging. They wouldn't need a phone to do this, but that doesn't rule out the possibility. I'd also add that the best deceptions are the ones that are a little more subtle. Not a creepy, cryptic voice on the phone, but a sweet, polite voice that shows up at your front door, typically in black slacks and a white button-up shirt in a boring tie. And usually in pairs. I'm of course referring to Mormons, the Church of Latter-day Saints, and their insane perverted leader Joseph Smith, who communicated with an angel except he didn't know it was a fallen one because he went against everything the Bible says. Right? That's because they typically come disguised as angels of light, Paul told the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians 11:14. Moroni, the angel Joseph said that he met, was a fallen angel who deceived him and is currently deceiving over 17 million people around the world. Close to 1 million of them at any given time may be out pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, and leading people straight to hell. Satan has messengers. All of them seek to steal, kill, and destroy Yahweh's human image bearers. Satan is also called the prince and power of the air. The air was thought to be the space between the earth and the heavens, the unseen realm. It was associated with spiritual influence and even demonic activity in ancient Jewish and Greco-Roman cosmology. It's just interesting that we got plenty of signals being thrown around by technology that's going to pass through Satan's domain. Make no mistake, Satan and his minions use movies, music, games, all kinds of technology to deceive us and to destroy us. And oh my gosh, don't get me started on AI. But does that mean Satan will use Verizon or T-Mobile to get at you? Well, I'm saying he and his forces are seen interacting with the physical world all throughout Scripture. He doesn't have to, but he can. And he has, so I refuse to rule it out. Do I think Gary Sudbrink received a demonic phone call? Well, if a demon didn't do it directly, he could have most certainly influenced someone else to do it in order to rob Gary and his family of their peace. They want to deceive or destroy, but if they can't do that, well, my friends, they'll settle on distraction. Get people looking to the stars for answers and not the heavens, not the one who left heaven and wrapped himself in humanity to live and dwell among us. To live the life we couldn't live, to die the death we deserve to die, and to victoriously raise from the dead, to prove he was God, and to prove he had the authority to grant us the forgiveness of sin. The good news is, truth has a voice too, and it doesn't stutter. Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice, and another they will not follow." Gary didn't recognize the voice on the line because it wasn't from the Good Shepherd. It came to confuse whoever it was, to unsettle, to leave questions in its wake. But the voice of God, the voice of Jesus Christ, it brings peace, not paranoia, conviction, not chaos. So whether the Sudbrink calls come from a prankster, a black project, a demon, or a shadow in the sky, they remind us that not every voice deserves our trust, and not every visitor comes in peace. But there's one voice worth following. This one also calls us by name, not to frighten us, but to save us. Gary Sudbrink is still alive, and though little is known about his current life as he seeks to avoid public attention, I hope he's found peace. I hope he's heard the voice of the God-man Christ Jesus say, "Is Gary Sudbrink there? I know you. I knit you together in your mother's womb. I love you. And I died and rose to take away your sins." I hope you too have heard the call of the gospel to surrender to Jesus. I thank you for listening. I hope you will all come back and join me next week. Whether you believe any of this or not, whether or not you agree with my assessments or not, I hope you'll continue to hop in the passenger seat, continuing on this interdimensional Uber ride together. I hope you learned something. If you didn't, I hope you were at least entertained by me and the boys. Please go check out the merch store, thedancingtoasterstore.printful.me. Thank you once again. Please like, subscribe, leave a review, share the podcast, do all the things wherever you consume The Dancing Toaster. But whatever you do, don't consume toasters and don't answer any calls from numbers you don't know. I love you. I'm out.
Report suspicious activities and call 911 for immediate response. Expect delay.
Nobody else will be taken from the zone. Stand by. Flight 022. Maintain approach. You're clear for
Expect traffic delays and restrictions. Take personal security precautions to avoid becoming a victim of an attack. Avoid crowded public areas and gatherings. Not travel in areas affected by the attack or in a known area elevated virus activity. Keep emergency supplies accessible and a full tank of gas at all times.
Be careful.
Government officials isolated and perhaps we will continue to keep you informed.